Hi, good morning. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our Cafecito con HACE. I hope you are hanging in there, staying strong, and focusing on the positive. My name is Patricia Mota. I'm currently serving as President and CEO for the Hispanic Alliance for Career Enhancement, national nonprofit whose mission is to positively impact workplaces by cultivating the pipeline of Latino talent, providing them the insight, access, and development to be successful in their careers. And those of you, quick reminder, our National Leadership Summit is next week. Feel free to use the Cafecito code as a free comp code to register and join us on April 21st and 22nd. I am thrilled to have our guest today, Rachel Williams, who is head of equity, inclusion, and diversity at X, the Moonshot Factory. Good morning, Rachel. How are you today? And you are on mute, my friend.
Sorry, good morning.
Good morning.
I first want to say I love hearing you talk about the mission of this organization. It just uplifts me and gives me so much hope and positivity. So love it. That's the right mission for sure. I'm all right? I'm not 100%, if I'm going to be honest about how I'm doing. You know, we are still in a global pandemic that is affecting Black and Brown people at a much higher rate than other groups. I myself have been personally affected. I have 5 family members pass away during this COVID period, some from COVID, some from complications. It is affecting a lot of people. We are all also fearful of our own lives and mortality. So there's that hanging over our heads. We've had social unrest against many different groups. So the Black community is suffering. The Asian community is suffering. Yep. Definitely the Hispanic community has been suffering. And so it's all come to a head for me today, to be honest. I'm going to stay positive for sure and try and silver line it. But I just also wanted to create the space for anyone else who is feeling this way, that it's okay that you're feeling this way. There's a lot going on.
No, there is a lot going on, Rachel, and thank you for creating that space. And first of all, you know, our condolences to you and your family members for those losses that you've personally experienced. And I know many of those tuned in can relate, right? And you know, as we were getting ready to jump on, you also mentioned in the case, right? The George Floyd murder trial is currently going on, and it's been going on for a while, and it weighs heavily on a lot of us. But not just that, but there's been also other police fatalities that we've seen impacting the Black men specifically that we've all seen in the news, right? Yeah. So I do think I appreciate you opening up because it affects everyone, right? And I think it's important, especially for those in your role, Rachel. You're heading up, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts for your organization. So you're getting it from everywhere, from leadership, from the employees that are asking to connect with you. So share with us about, you know, your background and why is this, you come to this from a lens of service, right? This is a role that is beyond a paid role. It's you're serving. Tell us about your background and how you got to where you are today.
Wow. Well, I'm a Bay Area native, so hello to all the Bay Area natives out there.
Nice and early over there.
Early over here, yes. So they may see this later. You know, I grew up in the Bay Area. I have a really big family, so I know folks watching now can probably relate. I have more than 300 family members in the Bay Area alone. So when I say I have a big family, people are like, that's great. But that also means a lot of birthday parties, a lot of gifts, a lot of, you know, it's a lot. But I also feel very grateful because they keep me grounded. I had a wonderful mother who had, she was an activist herself. She was a member of the Black Panther Party here in San Francisco and instilled in me. And my dad is a machinist for a major corporation and he was a labor union steward. So I come from people who want to organize and fight for folks' rights. Having been growing up in the Bay Area, it was diverse, but I was one of few Black children in my schooling from 1st grade through 12th grade. And so I almost feel like everything in my life prepared me to this role as head of equity, inclusion, and diversity, because I can talk to and I feel comfortable around the majority group, but I know intimately the challenges of marginalized people and want to advocate for them in our workplace. So that is some of how I got there. How I really got there was by being honest on a job. And I love telling the story because I think we hesitate to give corporations and leaders feedback as employees for fear that it, may come back to us, or we, just want to make sure we leave quietly. But I left Yelp when I was heading up recruiting back in 2011, I believe it was. So it's a while ago now. And I remember talking to the COO and telling him about what I had experienced as a Black woman in that organization, that my boss was taking my work and passing it off as his own, that, I didn't have the words around microaggressions at that time because it wasn't a conversation in tech back then. But essentially what I was describing was heavy microaggressions on a daily basis. And it caused me to leave because I felt unwanted, unwelcome, and didn't want to be there anymore. And he remembered that conversation 3 years later. And he called me and said, we have this head of diversity and inclusion. I remember our conversation and you giving me that feedback. Would you be willing to come back and help us solve this issue? And I was, first I said no. Well, twice I said
Twice.
He kept calling. And then finally, I asked him one critical question. I said, what have you all done since I gave you that feedback? And I knew, because I was head of hiring at that time, and I knew a lot of people still and had relationships, and I knew they hadn't done anything. And he told me, we haven't done anything. We've been so focused on becoming a public company and making this, company successful, we hadn't focused on it. And then for me, that was the one thing I needed to hear was truth. Because if I was going to rejoin this organization and head up diversity and inclusion, which I know you have to have really tough and honest, vulnerable conversations, that if he wasn't honest with me in this moment, that I wouldn't be able to work with that organization again. And so I was like, great. And he was like, great. I was like, great, because you're being honest with me about the fact that you haven't done anything. And I know you haven't. And so we can at least start our relationship off from a place of honesty. And I feel like I can do some great work there with you. So I rejoined.
And that's powerful. I think honesty also takes a lot of courage. And so kudos to you, Rachel. I think for those tuning in, we've been talking a lot about courage, especially this last year. And so I would also want to dig a little deeper in terms of where does that come from for you, or what advice do you get to be able to have the courage to be honest, to ask those right questions? Because you hit the nail on the head when you said earlier, many of us are not doing that in corporate America, and it needs to be.
Yeah. I think, it comes from a deep sense that I'm going to be okay. So not only do I have activist parents, but they instilled in me that I have what it takes. I am equipped. I am educated. I am smart. I am intelligent. I have value. I have something to offer. I also come from a very Christian family. And so, I serve God, and I serve not just people. And so that combination of things gives me the confidence to know that and operate without fear, that I'm going to land on my feet. If it didn't work out with Yelp, I would have been hired by someone else, or I have enough skills to go out on my own, that I'm going to be okay. And I think that is what, fear holds us back from. We think we're not going to be okay. You're going to be okay from someone saying no, or someone not hiring you, or someone not being pleased with your feedback. You're not going to die. That's not what's going to, right? You're going to be fine. Yes, it's scary, but ultimately, serve a higher power. You got your family, people who love you. You'll be okay. And that has fueled me throughout my entire career, that knowingness that it's going to be fine.
Thank you for sharing that, Rachel. I know those of you tuning in, it's going to be fine. And keep that in the back of your head, right? Or at the top of your mind, especially during trying times. Rachel, and those of you also have your questions, your comments ready. We'll have time to address that and ensure that we're able to make the best of this time that we have with Rachel. One of the things that, every year ASIC comes up with a theme, and you know this well because you're also one of our featured speakers for our Chief Diversity Officer Roundtable taking place next week. Whoop, whoop. And the theme is we lead at the intersection of identity, equity, unity, identity, embracing the intersectional identities we each bring to the table, the equity piece around meeting individuals where they are, but also each of us empowering ourselves to take action, to ask the questions, right? And then the unity piece, which Rachel, you're focusing on too during the roundtable next week, around allyship. Like, what does that really mean? When you hear this theme, what does it mean to you?
Yeah. Again, I think you really nailed it. What a beautiful theme to bring all of these concepts together, because I think in the past we've talked about them separately. And that's probably one of the reasons why we haven't seen enough advancement in doing this work. There is an intersectionality to our humanness and ourselves. So I know when people see me, they see the visible diversity that I'm Black and I'm a woman, but there's so much more to who I am. I am a Christian. I am the baby of my family. I have a certain socioeconomic background, a certain level of education. And those are things you can't just visibly see from a person. And it's for me about taking the time to dig a little bit deeper into who a human being is and all that encompasses someone. So not putting them in a box just off of what you see from them, but really asking questions and being curious about another person and another person's history. And more broadly, I think, this moment in time, at least over the last 12 months, we have been sheltering in place and we've seen the social unrest. And I know for a lot of the majority group, there's been questions about, what do? I didn't know this was happening. So for me, an understanding of equity or inequities is so important. What are those barriers to success and advancement for certain groups that exist in our society? And then what are those barriers that reside in our organizations? Because our organizations are not separate. Again, the intersectionality are not separate from society. It is all interconnected. And so how do those systems of inequity play out in our organizations? We have to examine that. We have to ask those tough questions and then root it out so that things can be fair for everyone. And if you don't understand that context, which means you have to know a little bit about history, you have to know a little bit about the law. You have to know a little bit about all these things and go beyond what we were taught in school. That's one thing that I really realize now, especially because the US is such a melting pot. We have so many immigrants who were educated in other countries and their education was focused on different things, and we're all coming together in this one place with different contexts. We all need to have a shared context about the history of this country and its unique relationship with race and challenges around race. And, it was illuminated for me a few weeks ago when at the height of the anti-Asian hate, this isn't the first time that this country has had a challenge around welcoming and accepting Asian people. Although it feels like it because it's the most recent, but there was the Chinese Exclusion Act in the 1800s. So this history in this country goes way back. And I think if everybody understands that, then we can start to become allies for one another at the right point in time. I think, one of the things about allyship that is challenging is that it's often discussed and talked about as something that white people need to do. And I'm not saying they don't. They definitely, absolutely do. But we all have an opportunity to be an ally given the context. I'm also an able-bodied woman, and I think about that a lot, especially I'm on the board of an organization that supports neurodiverse artists, so artists who are differently abled. And I am wholly in my ableness when I'm with them. And I know that there are things that I can advocate for on their behalf because of my ableness. And so I think if people were to think about all of the privilege that they have, whether you're able-bodied, you're straight, you're this, you're that, and then look around the room and see who it is that you can advocate for in that moment. It's a really powerful experience to have.
Wow, wonderful points that you just shared, and an example in terms of how you lead as an ally. And so for those of you tuning in, what are organizations or groups that you can be actively a part of, right? And engaging and being there and listening. So that's one way, right? The other piece, you talked a lot about education, right? I think our education systems definitely need some, we need a changing there so that we ensure that we have the right history that's being taught, or not just the right, but the history that's not being left behind and not mentioned in our school systems. But any books or that you would recommend for folks? I know one of our, we've talked a lot about White Fragility, for example, as a book. Any resource or book that you would recommend in addition to what you just mentioned for those that are looking to become a better ally?
Yeah. So you want to talk about Race by E.G. Olu was the book for me that I read last year that helped me to realize my own privilege, because society will have you believe that because you're a Black woman or you're a Hispanic woman or Hispanic man, that you have no privileges, and that you're a minority, right? Even the language we speak when we talk about one another or our different communities isn't empowering. And when I read her book, this particular chapter where she kind of lists out, like, just think about all of your privileges. You have a home, you have a car, you have access to healthcare, you have like all of these things. I started to feel so much better about myself. But once you start to feel better about yourself and you know what your privileges are, and you carry that into your meetings or your organization, you then can activate your privilege on behalf of someone else, which is also very, very powerful. So E.G. Omo's book, So You Want to Talk About Race, is so much more than just that. It was empowering for me, and I think it's a really great book for any ally.
Thank you for sharing that, Rachel. Great book for us to pick up. Have your questions or comments ready. I know we have a few minutes left. I have one, Rachel, that popped up regarding DEI has been really important at the forefront of corporate America, especially this past year, as we all know, right? How do we ensure that it isn't just a temporary movement, but that this is something that continues and that there's actual change that happens? What are your thoughts?
Well, we asked this question a lot last year, thinking that the situation with George Floyd was just a flash in the pan. Well, hello, 2021, where we saw an insurrection, anti-Asian hate, another killing of a Black man. So I honestly think, unfortunately, human beings in the state of our nation in this world will continue to amplify the need to do this work. What you can do internally, though, is maybe, one thing I want to tell young folks and young people, Gen Zers, you are the most diverse generation this world has ever seen. You are the most politically engaged. You are the most, you're the group that has really high standards and high values, and you only want to join organizations that mirror your values. Very different than Gen X and baby boomers, who my mom told me when I got on a job to just put my head down and do my work. But I think now you all have the ability to ask questions of your leaders and to make demands that will be listened to and heard. Of course, in a respectful way, but it's okay to ask your recruiter, what is your diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy at your company? Do you have employee resource groups? Check in and ask those questions so that it signals the importance of this strategy and this work to you. And if they want to hire you, that they're going to have to pull it together. I think asking those questions is a really good start. And you also need to make sure that you're going to be safe in those organizations, that these people are thinking about being more inclusive and pulling you in and valuing you as a talent. And so, one, asking the question. The second thing is lend a hand where you can. Diversity and inclusion leaders, we have very small teams. We don't have big budgets. And so we often have to rely on the passion and the skill of some of our employees who honestly just lend us their talent and their time. And so if you have the opportunity to maybe lead an employee resource group or to support events produced by organizations like HACE, then great. You should do that. We need everybody and we need as many hands as possible. I have a saying in my organization that everybody now knows: many hands make light work. And so if everybody's joining in to help me push this work forward, it won't be as heavy of work as it's meant to be.
Many hands make great work. I love that. It's about really embracing our collective power. If we each would only take action, right? Rachel, thank you so much for your time, your insights. I know we are proud at ASA to have X and you as a new partner joining us this year. And we see you taking action. I know you have your CEO also speaking at an HSI, a collaborative event that I'll be speaking at later this afternoon. So I see you. Thank you for all that you do to ensure we're building a more inclusive, equitable space. So one positive note or something that you're most hopeful for?
I am most hopeful when I talk to my mother, who is in her 70s now, who grew up in Jim Crow, Louisiana, who was a part of the Black Panther Party. When I talk to her and she tells me that she has never seen this type of engagement and this advancement, she didn't think she would see it in her lifetime. That gives me hope.
That gives us all hope.
And so I am hopeful that, it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel good right now, but we are making this world a better place for all of the children and people who are coming behind us. And so I'm going to stay focused on that.
Thank you for doing your part, Rachel. Those of you tuning in, don't forget to do your part. We appreciate your time. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Hasta la próxima. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Rachel. Bye-bye.
Bye.